We'll begin this first session. I'm sorry for the delay. We had some technical problems being the first session. Hope we won't have them anymore. And this first session we will have Álvaro Morcillo from Berlin, from the Central European University, who will start into alphabetical order, and he will start with his paper, which is called Spanish Barbarism, Unearthing Colonialism, Catholicism, and the Ibero-American War in Simmel's and Devers concepts. Álvaro, please. Bueno.
¿Hablo a ese micrófono? ¿Lo tengo que tener en la mano?
No, lo puedes poner acá si quieres o no. ¿Se puede poner acá? Sí.
Sí, dejarlo en la mesa, sí.
Sí.
Thank you to all those who have chosen to attend this session. Thank you to Esteban Vernick and Eduardo Weiss and to the other members of the organizing team for this invitation to present my paper on Weber, colonialism, and Catholicism. The main ideas of the paper are the following. They are new, multi-provocative pieces, and I hope to be able to engage you in a debate. This is the first time I'm talking publicly about these ideas, and I'm very interested in having feedback. The first main idea in the paper is that it was in the mid-1890s when Weber was lecturing in Freiburg that he started to develop this idea of a patrimonial domination. And he did so when he was teaching on applied economic policies, kind of history of economic policies throughout mankind history. And during his lectures, he dedicated a lot of attention. It was the longest section in the course to the policies of the Spanish Empire in the 16th, 17th century. And he also identified, when doing this, for the first time, a negative relation between Catholicism and capitalism. Another main idea in the presentation is that patrimonial domination is frequently associated to forms of colonialism that Weber saw as alien to modern capitalism. This is important for several reasons. One of them is that there is a discussion in certain sections of academic sociology, post-colonial sociology, where the argument is being raised that Weber was either uninterested on colonialism or an enthusiast of colonialism. So there is a certain danger here of Max Weber being cancelled, and I want to preempt this by showing that he did conduct research, thought about colonialism, and elaborate a critique of colonialism. And there is here also a link to Weber, to Simmel. Simmel had a completely different relation to Catholicism and to Spanish and Portuguese-speaking countries or areas of the world. Weber, this is part of my argument, did study Spanish history, the history of what we call today Latin America, in a professional way because it was necessary for his research, whereas Simmel was less interested in Catholicism and in these parts of the world, and when he mentioned them, it was mainly because of his interest in aesthetics. And there is another important and very actually suggestive exception to what I just said. Simmel knew apparently a lot about the history of the Catholic Church and use the Catholic Church as a kind of, and allow me to use the Bavarian terminology, ideal type, and he identified certain social relations that were best seen, exemplified in the history of the Catholic Church. I'll give more details in a few minutes. So this was the introduction to the presentation, and then I move on to the place of Catholicism in the literature on Weber, and to the question of what did Weber and Simmel know about Catholicism, Spanish, Portuguese-speaking countries. And the core of the presentation are these two ideas, that Catholic countries like the Spanish American Empire as the source of the concept of patrimonial domination and of the negative relation of Catholicism to the development of capitalism, and the connection between patrimonial domination and colonialism, which offer Weber the opportunity to develop a critique of colonialism. So the structure of Weber and Catholicism is almost non-existent. There are many obvious and good reasons, sound reasons for this. Weber never wrote a volume on Catholicism as he did on Taoism or in Confucianism. So the corpus of Weber's works is one main reason why we have this situation that very few people have thought about the relation of Weber and Catholicism. Of course, many of those who did were here in Argentina, in Brazil, Mexico, Chile. I'll come to that afterwards. You can see the lack of interest of the Weber scholars, the Weberology, the Weberologos in this issue, in the fact that usually useful work like Schroeder's and Attila's dictionary says very little about Catholicism, and what it says is to a certain extent misleading, because they quote Paul Honesheim. Paul Honesheim was someone who knew the Webers and the Weber household and the conversations in the Weber contact price pretty good, because he had contact with to them, Max and Marianne, for almost 20 years. And Honesheim says, yes, the relation of Weber to Catholicism was negative, but this is only one side of the coin. And I'm going to dwell this morning a bit on the other side of the coin. Part of the interest of Weber in Catholicism, which reappears in different stages of his life, at the beginning when he was teaching in Freiburg, in the lectures I'm going to draw from, reappears also towards the end of his life when he plans the 4th volume of the Economic Ethics of Religions, which would be about Occidental Catholicism. So he wanted to say more on Catholicism, and we can also reconstruct how his ideas about Catholicism and its relation to capitalism became increasingly positive during the course of his life. One reason is that he understood that certain forms of Catholicism, in particular Jesuitism, had actually, in this context, I think it's appropriate to use the expression, active affinities to capitalism. There is also another problem about the sources, which, if Weber knew a few things about Catholicism and about his Spanish work, Spanish and Portuguese-speaking countries, which were his sources? Where did he have his knowledge from? And one obvious source of his knowledge was his uncle, Hermann Baumgarten, who wrote a 3-volume biography of Charles V, Spanish king and German-Roman emperor. And these books, there was a lot of something very important for Weber, a lot of information about Contra-Reforma, Tekenreformation, So the response of the Catholic world to the Protestant reform. And another person from whom Weber learned a lot on Catholicism and on Jesuitism was his Heidelberg colleague, Everard Gottheim, who wrote on Ignaz from Loyola, Ignaz San Ignacio de Loyola, and also wrote on the Jesuit missions in Paraguay. There is more which could be said about what Germans from Weber and Siemens generation knew about these countries and about Catholicism. We can go back to this during the Q&A, someone has an interest. But now I move on to Siemel, and I will give an overview of what I have found on Siemel and the Catholic Church, and mainly on Spain, a bit on Spanish and Portuguese colonial empire. So my impression is that Siemel developed certain ideal types or concepts of social formations by studying the history of the church. A very good case in point is the concept of the charisma, the charisma of the office. Siemel does not use the term. The term apparently from Weber, Rudolf Somm doesn't use it either, but the idea is perfectly well developed in Siemel. And what I have used as my corpus for this paper is the philosophy of money and sociology. A similar role is played by the church when Siemel discusses the ideal type of the 13 Gaudes, that person or that individual who benefits from conflicts which are waged by others. So simply by standing by an individual grows in power or influence, and the church is historically for Siemel the best example. And the idea of celibacy has also been very well developed in the Catholic Church. In other cases, the church has not been apparently the origin of the ideal type Siemel is describing, but he uses the church to illustrate it. In the case of the monk, as someone who can develop to others, who can relate to others in different roles, as a confessor, as a religious idea, as a beggar, or very interesting, the English medieval church as a social relation which really crossed all social strata. Regarding the Spain and the Hispanic world in Siemel, I will only add that there is this relatively important relation between Siemel and Diego Velázquez, the Spanish painter. Siemel places Velázquez at the same level of artistic achievement as Shakespeare or Johann Sebastian Bach. But this is one of the few occasions in which Siemel really dwells on an individual or from Spain or the Spanish or Portuguese then colonial empire. And there is always a certain level of Orientalism when he's not talking about Velázquez. And I will explain later why I think there is Orientalism, if someone wants to know it. So now the things are getting serious. I'm running out of time, the computer is running out of battery, and these are the really important ideas here. So the first time that Weber argues that a positive connection between Protestantism and modern capitalism exists was during these lectures in the 1890s. And this first formulation of the thesis is flanked by a negative connection between Catholicism and modern Catholicism. And the first formulation of the thesis is not an individual level thesis, or a macro-sociological one, it's an institutional thesis. What Weber is saying is the policies of the Spanish crown towards their American possessions were inimical to the development of capitalism. And he develops this idea in different moments of his life and of different publications or manuscripts. And by the way, this idea is not from me, it is from Hauke Jansen, who edited, or the formulation of the claim is from Hauke Jansen, who edited the lectures on applied economic policy for the Max Weber Gesamtausgabe. On the left, you can see a quote from the lectures, and on the right is my gloss to that quote. And the main idea for the development of my thesis is that Weber sees in these policies traits that he will later associate to patrimonial domination, like personalism, income from looting and state capitalism, and these two, looting and state capitalism, are also very important in general for his concept of colonialism, and he associates them both very strongly in different parts of his work until the last months of his life. So it was not an occurrence during the lectures as a young man in Freiburg. It appears in different points in time and in different contexts. And there is, of course, this connection to irrationality, looting, etc., and capitalism and modern capitalism as being ideal, typically free from violence. An interesting detail here is that he sees the policies of Spain, implicitly Portugal, and even of France in the 16th century as imitation of the policies enacted by Holland in England. And the crucial thing is this line on at the bottom of the quote. The policies of the Spaniards, the Portuguese, do not stand in the main line of continuity with the later autonomous capitalist development. And this is from 1920. This is from the so-called first part of Economy and Society, when he's finishing the essay on traditional domination. Colonialism, so we change topic a bit, or we become more specific. There are influential authors like Wolfgang Monsen, famous one like Andrew Zimmerman, the global historian, and recent ones like Gurvinda Bambra and her husband Homewood, who have criticized Weber because of his enthusiasm about colonialism, and who have claimed, like most recently Bambra and Homewood, that Weber does not include colonialism in the concepts which he contributed to social theory, to sociology, which I would say that it's wrong. Let me add that these are influential criticisms. The book was reviewed at the London Review of Books, and I think this is something we should take seriously if we don't want to see Weber cancelled. Of course, Weber said a few unpleasant things about colonialism and about German colonialism, but I think that if we take the whole picture from Weber as a young man in an inaugural lecture in Freiburg to what he wrote towards the end of his life, and including in the context of World War I, we will see that he became less enthusiastic, to put it mildly, about German colonialism, and very critical of colonialism in theoretical terms. And he always associated colonialism to high levels of violence, coercion, etc. He did this for the first time in the 1890s when he was teaching. By the way, I have always mentioned Freiburg, but the lectures, he also offered this lecture in Heidelberg right before getting ill. And actually, the parts of the lecture dealing with mercantilism and Spanish colonial policy are probably from Heidelberg, and the last time he told them. They bring us to 1898, I think. So there is this exposition of Spanish colonial policy in the lectures, and he further shows the agricultural and the commercial trade order established by the Spaniards, and he shows all the patrimonial traits in these policies, including the form of the strategy to give protection to the indigenous population. He has very enlightening idea, like when he said that, of course, the church tried to protect indigenous population and the crown also did, but this was the only way of being able to permanently exploit the population. So if the population had been completely exterminated, as it could have happened at certain points in time, this arrangement could have not worked, and the crown had an important interest in the economic viability of the colonies, because the policy was oriented exclusively to the benefit of the crown and to the exclusion of the Spanish bourgeoisie. And this is one of the main elements in the policy which Weber sees as inimical to any capitalist development. And he also sees very negative elements in the policy, elements which are harmful for capitalist development in the regulation of trade. The crown centralizes trade in Seville, in these fleets which cross the ocean twice a year. The crown enacted high tariffs and isolated the American colonies from each other, almost completely preventing trade between them. And these are all traits that Weber, these are all traits which Weber associates to patrimonialism. And this is one of the reasons why I think that Weber devised the ideal type of patrimonial domination, having in mind mainly these Spanish colonial policies. And coming to Weber's views on colonialism, as I said, he associates colonialism with high levels of violence, and you can see in the vocabulary he used that this is the case. So he speaks of enslaving, tagging, exploited, and forced monopolization of trade. These are the things that Weber considers intrinsical to the way in which patrimonial rulers exploit colonies. And this same idea appears in the last version of the Colonial Society, and really it's one of the confirmations. There are other examples of Weber being critical of colonialism. There is also the vocabulary of irrationality. Colonialism is associated to disproportionate amount of benefits. So when the capitalists are making too much money, this is usually because of colonial exploitation, and there is by association, if it's very rational, it's not modern capitalism. So this is what he's hinting at all the time. And if we compare with Weber's vision of colonialism at the beginning and in particular at the end of his time with what Simmel wrote, I think that what Weber is offering is more suggestive, because what Simmel ends up showing a lot of understanding for British colonialism. So you can see in the quote that in the moment that the metropolis, in this case England, gives equal status as provinces to the colonial possessions, then there is no reason for secession attempts. So let me conclude. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, Weber claimed very early that the patrimonial policies of the largest continental powers, in particular Spain, were setting hurdles to the rise of modern capitalism and placed countries like Spain in a path of development which will not bring those countries towards the more developed forms of capitalism that we will see later on in Holland, England, and New England. This is important because it shows us when Weber first formulated the Protestant ethic thesis. It also shows us very interesting continuities in his thoughts, in his ideas. So this formulation of the Protestant ethic thesis took place 6-7 years, if not even earlier than the publication of the first essays on the Protestant ethic. And the other main idea of the presentation is that Weber condemns colonialism as he, not explicitly, because that would be Werturteil, but he makes very clear this association of colonialism with violence and irrationality, including state capitalism, looting, tax farming, etc. And one that's where Weber could do this because he leaned more on these countries and to some extent on this religion than other contemporaries of his. And this is a bit of a provocation, but this raised the question of whether Weber was not one of the, or the one sociological classic who paid more attention to our country's culture, language spaces. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alvaro. Now we will have our second speaker, in this case by meet. It's Hans-Peter Müller from the Humboldt University in Berlin. And the title, maybe you can say it yourself, Professor Müller, if you have it.
Yes, money and capitalism, on the infrastructure of modernity. That's the title. Okay, shall I begin? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you first of all for the invitation to this marvelous conference, and I'm sorry not to be physically present, but only digitally present. What I'm trying to do is why Simmel chose money as the trademark of modernity, and why Weber chose capitalism as the trademark of modernity, to figure out why they did that. They both tried to understand modernity. They both were dissatisfied with the state of the art of sciences of their time. Simmel heavily criticized, as you know, philosophy. Weber criticized economics. And in due consequences, they both developed their own approach to the new science of sociology. Simmel conceptualized the theory of interaction, Weber a theory of action and order. Now, since modern society is above all differentiated, complex, and dismantled into different spheres of life, both knew that only one concept, to capture fragmented modernity, would not be enough. Yet in their diagnosis of the time, they tried to do so by referring to a philosophy of money, Simmel, and a socio-economic approach to capitalism, Weber. So money and capitalism were the key concepts to capture the core and gestalt of an age. And they denote in the Weberian term the spirit of the times. So for Simmel, that was money. For Weber, it was capitalism, the most fateful force of the day. Now, in order to throw more light on why they did what they did, I will turn first to Simmel, why money, secondly to Weber, why capitalism, and in sort of a kind of conclusion to money or capitalism, question mark. My thesis is that Simmel, as a philosopher and sociologist, opted for money as the trademark of modernity, Weber, as an economist and very hesitant sociologist, focused on capitalism. Now let's turn to the first part, why money. Simmel wrote in 1900 his philosophy of money, and nobody understood why he did so. An economy of money would have made sense, but what is a philosophy of money? What was he after? Well, I think on the one hand, he tried to show the prerequisites of money and its meaning, which he tried to develop in his first analytical part, and he looked at three things: value and money, the value of money as a substance, and money in the sequence of purpose. But on the other hand, in the second synthetic part, he discusses the consequences of widespread money usage for the people and their culture in order to show how crucial, how central money has become under modernity. So he looks at individual freedom, the money equivalent of personal value, and the style of life, the famous sixth chapter. Now, up till today, it has not quite been clear what Simmel was really after and why he did what he did. But upon closer look, Simmel conceptualized the relationship between economy and culture in quite a similar way, like Max Weber and Werner Sombart did in The Protestant Ethic and in Modern Capitalism. Yet fragmented modernity is completely unable to offer the recognition of totality in the way Karl Marx did when he studied the laws of capitalistic production. Simmel therefore tries to think totality via the fragment in order to preserve, I cite Simmel, the possibility of finding in each of life's details the totality of its meaning. Well, for lack of time, we can, of course, not delve into the intricate details of Simmel's argumentation. It's a very complicated book. But I will try to show, or try to carve out his major results of the analytical and synthetic part. Well, first of all, the analytical part. Simmel constructs a new theory of value, a first and basic insights. He neither follows the objective approach by Ricardo and Marx, nor the subjective approach by Mengers, Jevons, and Walras, but he develops a third approach beyond work, the objective approach, and beyond benefit, the subjective approach. And what is this third approach about? Well, the bridge between goods, two goods and their value is, value definition, is exchange. Because Simmel assumes that goods find their value by mutual comparison. And in that sense, Simmel considers the close connections between value exchange and money to be so crucial that he claims that man is the exchanging animal. Der Mensch ist das tauschende Tier. He therefore is the founder of the so-called exchange paradigm. Now, the more and faster a money economy evolves, the more money turns into an absolute means for social intercourse. Such a coincia oppositorum circumscribes the double and seemingly contradictory meaning of money as a medium. On the one hand, it shows teleological determination, money for an object. On the other hand, it is still a means for whatever end, money for something. Now, this is a second crucial insight by Simmel that he demonstrates with respect to the surplus plus value of wealth, superadditum des Reichtums. Money ennobles its bearers that far exceed the amount of